Right, I think sort of the majority of people have probably come into the call now. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar on living with fatigue. My name's Gemma and I'm part of the information team here at the MS Trust, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. I hope you can all see and hear me okay. If anyone is having any technical issues, then please pop a little comment in the chat box below. There's a button at the bottom of the screen and our technician will try to help you. So you may have noticed that you can't see any of the other webinar attendees on your screen. That's the same for everyone, including myself and our speakers. So we will be recording today's session, but your privacy will be protected. So a little bit about the MS Trust, for those of you that aren't familiar, we're here for everyone affected by MS from the point of diagnosis. We work to make sure that people with MS can access good quality specialist care and live the best life they possibly can. We do this by supporting and training your MS health professionals and funding MS specialist nurses and advanced MS champions across the UK. We also produce practical evidence-based information online and in print. And we also have a dedicated inquiry service team who are friendly and knowledgeable and are there for anyone to speak to if you have questions about MS. So today we're talking about a very common symptom which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, and that's MS fatigue. We'll be discussing how fatigue can be managed in everyday life, from when you're at work to dealing with a busy family at home. And also juggling your social life. We're really pleased to be joined by some excellent speakers today. So we have Kate Hayward, Tessa Craver and Hugh Nibloe with us. So Kate Hayward is an occupational therapist who specialises in neurological conditions. She's recently taken up a post with Coventry and Warwickshire Partnership NHS Trust in their post-COVID-19 rehabilitation service. Kate has a special interest in fatigue management and vocational rehabilitation. We're also joined by Tessa Craver. So Tessa is also a senior occupational therapist with a specialty in adult neurology. She's based at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in London. She's extensively trained in fatigue management, including a fatigue self-management program known as FACETS, which stands for Fatigue Applying Cognitive, Behavioural and Energy Effectiveness Techniques to Lifestyle. And then finally, we're joined by Hugh Nibloe. So Hugh lives with MS and he's a wheelchair curling World Championship silver medal winner and a wheelchair curling Paralympian for Team GB. So in terms of the format of the session, Kate and Tessa will start with a 20-minute presentation on fatigue management. We'll then speak to Hugh, who will discuss his personal experience of living with fatigue and how it's impacted his sporting career. If you have any questions for our speakers during the course of the webinar, please pop them in the Q&A box. There's a button at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A and has two little speech bubbles. If you pop your questions in there, the plan is for us to put as many questions to our speakers as we can at the end of the session. And we're aiming for the session to last between 45 minutes to 1 hour. So before we hear from Kate and Tessa, we're going to start with a short video which features some quotes from people with MS explaining how fatigue affects them.
It's like going the wrong way up an escalator. Everything takes twice as much effort to get to exactly the same place.
Fatigue feels heavy and foggy, like fighting to try and stay awake after you've taken a sleeping tablet or sedative, when all your body wants to do is shut down.
I literally feel like I've shut down. I can't open my eyes. I can't move. Literally can't lift a finger. I imagine fatigue, it's what it's like to be a boulder. Weirdly, if I do a bit of gentle exercise, I usually get the best rest and it's like a reset.
Fatigue is like wading through treacle. Every movement or memory is just out of reach and I haven't the strength to push forward.
I feel like I'm being held down by rocks. I feel like my legs are made of lead. I'm wearing concrete boots and wading through mud. When I'm overly fatigued, I feel physically sick.
A wave of sickness comes over me, and I just want to be quiet and left alone because I can't think straight, and my limbs feel heavy and achy, a bit like flu.
Fatigue is like the worst hangover and period cramps rolled into one, but no amount of rest eases the feeling. As a physical sensation, it reminds me of falling into quicksand or a swamp. It's a viscous, heavy, pulling feeling, but if I try to fight it, it hurts like hell and robs me of my breath. As a sound, it's like a muted background noise of violins scratching away that seem to be ever increasing in speed and out of sync, while the outside world seems dampened and fading.
Fatigue feels as if I am inflatable and someone has pulled the air stopper out. My brain goes fuzzy and I can't think clearly. My speech slurs, my eyesight goes, and my eyes start to close. I think the room is full of smoke. Swallowing becomes more difficult. My balance gets worse and my legs feel heavy and clumsy.
So we're now going to go to Kate and Tessa for their presentation. If you could both just pop your cameras and your mics on, and your presentation should appear in a moment.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Tessa Craver. Like Gemma said,
hospital for neurology and neurosurgery, but like Gemma said, I've recently moved to a trust in Coventry. So we're really glad to be here to talk to you all this morning.
and today we're going to do a little webinar on fatigue. I'll go ahead and start. So as the video just showed, describing MS fatigue is slightly different for every person, but we know that fatigue is a problem for up to 92% of people who have MS, and it can be very disruptive to daily life, including in your work life as well. So this is quite a common quote that I know a lot of my patients hear. "Oh, but you look so well." And that's a very frustrating thing to hear. We know that fatigue is a challenging symptom to have because it's an invisible symptom. So a partner, maybe your friends, your work colleagues cannot see it. And as a result, fatigue can cause problems with these relationships. So it's really important to make sure that your significant others in life understand that fatigue is a very real and common symptom of MS. Managing fatigue it does require a coordinated approach that involves your family members, your colleagues, your friends, and if they can understand your fatigue patterns, then they'll be able to support you in the best way possible. So we do have a few fatigue definitions. Many people with MS fatigue report feeling an overwhelming sense of exhaustion and lack of energy that's completely out of the proportion of the activities they're performing. We all experience a short-term fatigue, and generally for people without MS fatigue, it does not stop them from doing the things that they need to do. But in contrast, for people with MS fatigue, they find it can impact on their ability to meet their family needs, their work, or their social responsibilities. So we know that the causes of MS fatigue are complicated. There's a range of dimensions, and there's several causes and types of fatigue which might coexist at the same time and interact with each other. And there's two main categories of fatigue. We have primary fatigue and secondary fatigue. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit more about those now. So for primary fatigue, there is something that we call lassitude. This refers to an overwhelming sense of tiredness, and it might be not necessarily directly impacted by a certain activity that you're doing. You might wake up feeling tired. We also have something called short-circuiting fatigue or neuromuscular fatigue, and this relates to fatigue that comes on during continuous repetitive activities such as walking. And it responds really nicely to rest. So for example, you might be taking a walk and feel a sudden onset of fatigue, but if you take a short rest break, maybe on a local bench, then you can resume walking again. We also have heat sensitivity fatigue, and this is really common for individuals with MS to feel noticeably more tired when you're in a hot or humid environment. And this is because it might be due to the lack of protection from your myelin sheath, and some may be due from the overwork of the nervous system that must be carried out in order to complete that activity. And we'll go through some recommendations of how to manage this a bit later. Then finally, we have cognitive fatigue, and this is feeling quite, your memory is affected, your concentration is affected, maybe you're struggling to do some new learning as well, and that can be really challenging. Then we have secondary fatigue factors, and these are not necessarily directly impacted from your MS. So these are things potentially that are caused by other things. So for example, sleep deprivation. The general population has a high prevalence of sleep problems, but in MS, we know that 25 to 35% of people have disturbed sleep. And this can include difficulties getting to sleep, maybe waking up regularly while you're trying to sleep, or waking up too early in the morning. And sometimes symptoms may impact on sleep, such as spasms, pain, bladder issues. So it's important to discuss these with your MS consultant and MS nurse. We know that poor sleep patterns can lead to depression and anxiety, being physically less active, and we're going to discuss those a bit more later on in the presentation. We know that depression and low mood can also affect your motivation and make you feel a bit more lethargic, and feeling fatigued all the time can make a person feel very low. So participating in enjoyable activities is really important to try and help boost your mood and in turn help with your energy levels. We know that anxiety and stress has a direct impact on your fatigue levels as well. Stress can make anyone tired, and dealing with MS can make life more stressful, going to different appointments and things. And this can be a vicious cycle that's created with fatigue causing stress and stress causing fatigue. So if you want to speak more about your stress, we would advise that would be helpful to your fatigue levels. Also looking at nutrition, so it's very important to have a balanced diet and make sure you're well hydrated, trying to make sure that you're staying away from caffeine, and it is important in terms of helping with your fatigue. Then we know that constant pain can be really draining as well. So this can impact on your sleep, like I mentioned earlier, and your mood, and make it less likely that maybe you participate in physical activity, and leading to deconditioning. Bringing me on to deconditioning, so making sure that you're exercising enough. We want to, if you're not strong cardiovascularly or as fit, you might be spending more energy on activities that you would normally do before quite easily. So making sure that you're exercising enough. And then of course, an infection. So if you're struggling with recovering from COVID or having a local cold or flu, your body's working that much harder to get over that virus, and that's going to make you feel more fatigued. Then of course, looking at your surroundings. So, looking to see that you have a suitable place to rest, and maybe stimulation as well. Now that the COVID restrictions are starting to lessen, there's more people out and about, and that can impact on your cognitive and emotional fatigue as well. And then finally, other medications. So we know that some medications are used to treat MS, and these can cause fatigue, such as spasticity and pain. So if you notice a relationship in your change of medications and that's impacting on your fatigue, we recommend definitely speaking to your MS nurse about this. So trying to identify your own fatigue is going to be the most important skill that you can do. And we advise our patients to use something called an activity diary. And this is where you log all the activities you're doing for maybe 2 to 3 days in the week, and maybe the 2 days at the weekend if your weekday schedule is different than your weekend if you're working in the week. And this is where you start, maybe with the time that you wake up, recording the activity you're doing, recording the fatigue level that you're feeling, maybe how you value that activity. Is it something that's very important to you? Do you need to do that every day? Or maybe it's not something that's as important. And your satisfaction with your performance. Is it something that you want to improve upon, or are you happy with how you're doing in that activity? And this is a good way to try and pull apart the activities you're doing every day and seeing if there's any trends or triggers to your activity. And Kate's going to speak a little bit more about that.
Great, thanks, Tessa. Yeah, so as Tessa said, often what we'll do is to get people to do an activity diary, just to take that step back and see, because it can feel that fatigue is there kind of constantly all the time, and it can be hard to actually see if there is any variability within that. But often when people do their diary, they can kind of identify that they might fall into this boom and bust pattern, which can be like kind of feeling like, oh, I've got some energy, so sort of doing as much as you can, doing everything, and then that leads to a kind of an enforced period of rest, a bit of a crash, and that can either be kind of in like a good day and a bad day, or it might be kind of within the day, there might be that kind of variability, and lots of people experience this kind of boom and bust, but actually that's really hard to sustain for our bodies, and what people will tend to see is they end up having this sort of decreasing level of activity overall. And what we want to do kind of through looking at kind of fatigue and kind of making some changes is to try and get a bit more of a base level of activity. So to have some smaller variations in activity levels. So not pushing yourself right up to that top limit, but then equally not crashing right down to the bottom. And so looking at ways to try and get a more kind of balanced level of activity across the day and across the week in relation to your fatigue levels, by trying to understand them a little bit more and thinking what might be triggering them, what is it that kind of really exacerbates my fatigue levels, but equally what is it that might kind of help them. Is there anything that kind of is a bit more energizing for me? Like someone said in that in the video at the beginning, that actually exercising at the right sort of time and at the right level for them was quite kind of actually helpful. Yeah, so just trying to get that variation. So often what we'll see from people's diaries is examples of kind of poor energy management. So like we've been talking about, kind of overdoing it when their energy is high and paying for it later. And that's kind of understandable why people do that, because you get kind of stuck in this cycle of, I better do it now because I won't be able to do it later. So you think, oh, I need to push on and get, because I've got all these things to do. But maybe you can't do it later because you've overdone it now. So it's trying to kind of unpick that and sort of test out, kind of making some changes really. Feeling like you have to push through and finish tasks in one go. I think this is really something that people say to us a lot, and perhaps something that we're just used to doing in Western society. We all kind of were told when we were little, oh, you can go out and play once you finished your homework. You know, we're all kind of do something, start and finish it, and then kind of have a rest or kind of move on to something else. So that kind of guides that behavior, I think, for people. Perhaps on the opposite side, for some people, they might be doing too little and then feel lethargic. They might feel like, actually, I just need to rest all the time and that will help manage my fatigue. But then that can lead into some of the kind of secondary factors that Tessa was talking about, and can kind of increase lethargy levels. So trying to find out what might be the kind of key things for you. Not having energy left for enjoyable activities, I think again is quite common, but that again can link with kind of impacting on mood, which, like we've talked about, can overlap with fatigue levels. So again, it's just important to think about. Not matching activities to energy levels. So can be helpful to kind of get an idea of the kind of activities that do take more energy for you, and the ones that perhaps don't take as much, and then think about how that can be planned into the day and the week, so that perhaps all the high energy activities aren't kind of pushed together, that you've got a balance of them with kind of lower energy kind of activities. Not planning ahead, because to manage your kind of energy, you need to think about how you're going to kind of plan things. I'm finding it difficult to ask others to sort of help you, really. And that's one of the sort of key areas, I suppose, of energy conservation, is sort of thinking, actually, how can I kind of share tasks with other people? Is there a way that I can kind of delegate the things that I know that are really going to be exhausting for me, which will then mean we don't have, you know, we can't go out and do another thing that would be really useful for us as a family, perhaps. So that can often lead, just thinking about those kind of poor kind of energy management things, can kind of lead to this sort of vicious cycle. This is just an example, really, of kind of what sort of perhaps guides our behaviour to sort of fit with that boom and bust pattern that we were talking about. Can often sort of start to have, quite without realising it, kind of quite negative thoughts about kind of fatigue and the impact that that's having on kind of the activities that you might need to do. So in this example, you might kind of just have that automatic kind of negative thought that, well, if I don't finish this now, I'm useless. And I think we can often be our own harshest critics, can't we, and kind of call ourselves these names without really realising it. And then that can guide you, that lead you to sort of overdoing it, to sort of pushing through and kind of fitting with that boom and bust pattern, which leaves you kind of feeling exhausted. Then you get to that kind of crash point where actually you can't push on, you can't do more at that point. You need to take an extended period of rest, and that might exacerbate other physical symptoms of your MS. And that then leads to kind of feelings of frustration and inadequacy, which then kind of comes you back round on that cycle. So I think it's important to just, if you can, sort of take a step back and kind of see if that, you know, can I see myself falling into that pattern? And probably, you know, if I was talking to my friend about that, would I be as harsh on them? I wouldn't think that they were useless if they didn't sort of finish a task, or if they broke it down and took a rest, or if they kind of asked someone to help with it. So again, it's just sort of reflecting on that and seeing if that might be something that's happening for you, and whether that might be impacting on how you're then managing your fatigue. Because I guess what we're saying is that we can't kind of make the fatigue go away kind of completely, but it's about learning kind of different ways to do things that might help you feel a bit more in control of it, rather than feeling like the fatigue is controlling you. So one of the ways we look at doing that is by balancing activity and rest. And that's really important, and finding out what is rest for you. For some people, it might be that having a kind of nap in the day is really restorative for them. For other people, that might not work, depending on what's happening for them kind of in their life. And it might be that kind of planning some rest breaks where you kind of do some kind of relaxation is a helpful way to kind of keep topping up your energy levels. What we're thinking about with rest really is that you kind of come away from that boom and bust pattern where you wait till you absolutely need it to have your rest break, but that you actually take them a bit more proactively, kind of before you need it. So you're topping up your energy levels as you go. So you kind of plan your rests in, kind of perhaps, you know, having a break mid-morning, mid-afternoon, having a break at lunchtime, kind of perhaps coming away from those habits of, oh, I carry on, you know, I eat my lunch at my desk, I don't actually have a break, you know, those kind of things, so that you're proactively kind of topping up your energy and thinking a bit like thinking about it a bit like a battery, that if we, you know, if we let our phones kind of completely run down, then they turn off, but if we keep them kind of charged up, then they kind of don't switch off. So trying to think about it that way. And then one of the things that we often think about with people is this sort of toolbox approach, I suppose, of kind of energy conservation techniques. So getting that idea of the activities that you're doing, the ones that take more energy, less energy, but equally the ones that you enjoy and don't enjoy. We're not saying that if you enjoy an activity and it takes lots of energy that you shouldn't be doing it, but it's about how you might plan that into your day and your week, break it up. So thinking about what perhaps could be delegated, whether that's kind of at home with kind of family members to the children, you know, are there jobs that you do that you've always done kind of that actually could be shared in a different way? prioritizing what are the things that are important for you to kind of keep doing, thinking about how you pace activities, so that's how you might break them down with rest breaks. Like we're talking about, you don't have to start and finish something in one go. So what we often talk about is something called time not task. So thinking about a task that you're doing, so maybe that's kind of the ironing as an example, but if you have like a massive pile of ironing, by the time you've kind of worked through and done the whole thing, you've kind of pushed yourself into that boom and bust pattern. So it's getting an idea of what your tolerance might be for different types of tasks. So for something like the ironing, maybe actually 5 or 10 minutes is enough. That's within your kind of tolerance level for that type of physical task, given that there's a heat element, you know, and that actually then you break up. So you think, actually, so I will do sort of 10 minutes of that activity, and then I'll come back to the rest. I'll either take a break and then come back and do another 10 minutes, or I'll plan in to do some more the next day. Grading is kind of looking at different ways that you can do tasks. So that might be thinking about, again, if we stick with the kind of ironing example, it might be that you can do that in sitting rather than standing. Maybe that uses less energy, so you're able to sort of do for a little bit longer. So kind of exploring that. And then thinking about organizing and planning to be able to sort of use these different techniques. It's kind of thinking about how you might think of that. And there's lots of good examples of these kind of these areas within the kind of MS Trust literature around fatigue. So these are some ways you might think about building your energy levels. So like we've talked about rest, and it's finding what rest means for you. So really we're thinking about switching off kind of mind and body. So kind of, but equally some people will find that perhaps moving from a cognitive task to a physical task is enough to kind of change their kind of energy levels. It might be that they find cognitive tasks really draining. So getting up, coming away from their desk and having a kind of a walk for 10 minutes is actually quite restorative. For someone else, that might be the other way around. So it's seeing how things impact for you. But actually finding what rest is for you, maybe that's kind of exploring some mindfulness techniques, or kind of working on just some relaxed kind of breathing. But like we talked about, kind of thinking about where you might rest, and trying to do it kind of proactively rather than waiting till you absolutely need it before you take a rest. And kind of allowing yourself that that's okay, that that's actually an appropriate kind of management strategy to help keep topping your energy levels up. Relaxation, we've kind of just talked about. Thinking about your sleep-wake routines. So this was something, again, that Tessa talked about earlier in the presentation. Sleep can often be affected for people, and that definitely impacts on fatigue levels. So it can be helpful to think about what might be impacting on that, and perhaps setting yourself a time that you want to be asleep, and kind of perhaps coming back from that half an hour and giving yourself a wind down time, so that you're not expecting yourself to be on the go and then just fall asleep straight away. And equally then having a time for getting up in the morning and giving yourself a wind up time again of half an hour, rather than expecting yourself to wake up and jump straight out of bed, can be helpful. Exercise is a really good way of kind of supporting your fatigue levels, and there's been lots of research around the benefits of exercise and fatigue. I'm going to go on and talk about a few tips for that. Scheduling of activities, we've talked about that, kind of getting an idea of the activities that take more energy, thinking about when you have more energy and how you might kind of plan things in and pace them over the day and the week. Using that toolbox approach that we've just been discussing. And yeah, increasing your enjoyable activities, because I know when we talk to people, it's often those that are the things that go straight away, that, and actually they use all their energy on those basics. And I know you've got to do those, but it's about, again, taking that step back and looking at how things might be able to be done in a different way, so that you can still engage in those more enjoyable things, because that then can have a positive impact on your mood, which can have a positive impact on your fatigue levels. So in terms of exercise, these are just some really basic tips. So thinking about exercise that you enjoy. Perhaps saving energy in day-to-day activities might mean you have more energy for structured exercise. Think about pacing. So again, it's okay to take a break within the exercise that you're doing. Keeping cool, so perhaps water-based exercise might be good, thinking about the heat-sensitive fatigue. Setting realistic goals, minimizing travel distance, scheduling exercise for when your energy levels tend to be highest. That's something that we've been talking about. And perhaps exercising with a friend. That's good for all of us to help keep our motivation levels up. And thinking about whether accessing some input from a physio might be helpful for you if you haven't kind of exercised for a long time and there are any specific kind of concerns. So that kind of really leads us on to thinking just about treatment options for fatigue and MS. One of the kind of programs that has been developed is called the Facets program. So that's a 6-week fatigue management course that looks at energy conservation, but also kind of cognitive behavioral kind of approaches. So thinking about that area that we were talking about, that really a lot of this is thinking about how you change your behavior, how you do things differently, and challenging our thoughts about that is really key to allow us to make those changes. So perhaps seeing if the Facets program is being run in your area. If it's not, the MS Society have developed a kind of online fatigue management course, which is kind of developed from the Facets program, which is available via their website. So that might be a good option for you. Looking then to see if you can access kind of physiotherapy or occupational therapy locally, if they offer a kind of one-to-one input relation to this. And also thinking about if for you it's perhaps more around the kind of mood, anxiety, thinking skills side, actually linking with some cognitive behavioral therapy via your local kind of IAPT service, or whether you have any psychology input through your MS service, can be a useful thing to explore. And then there are some medications for fatigue and MS, which we're not really touched on now. The evidence is fairly minimal, I think, for their kind of efficacy, but some people have found them helpful. So it might be something that you speak to your GP or your kind of MS consultant about. And just our acknowledgement, lots of our slides today are from the Facets program, which is developed by the MS Society and a team at Bournemouth University. So thank you to them.
So thank you, Kate and Tessa, for going through all that. There was lots of really useful practical tips there, which I'm sure lots of people will find useful. I think your idea about sort of looking at an activity schedule was really good, and trying to avoid the boom and bust cycle, which we often speak to people with MS that do struggle to sort of avoid that cycle. Just a quick reminder, if you do have any questions, do pop them in the Q&A box and we'll try and get to them at the end of the session. So now we're going to talk to Hugh. If you could pop your camera and your mic on, Hugh, and we're just going to talk about your personal experiences of living with fatigue. So thank you for joining us. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and your first symptoms?
Yeah, I was diagnosed in 2006. I had my first symptoms back in 2005. I had blurry vision, double vision was the first thing, and then my legs decided to stop working properly on me, so they were my first symptoms, and ended up diagnosed in February 2006.
And can you talk a bit about how fatigue directly affects you day to day?
Yeah, it's always listening to the presentation was good, because I always find when I've got a planned day, I'm all right, but it's when I've got an unplanned day, that's when it affects me most. If I've not put anything in my diary to do, I end up feeling it more. But it's funny, my nephew, when he was only 2 or 3, he was getting a lift. He was walking up home with my mum, and he said, "Granny, can I get a lift up the road?" And my mum was like, "No, you'll need to walk." And he was like, "But Granny, I only have 10,000 breaths in a day. I don't want to waste them all walking up this hill." And it struck me, it's stayed with me ever since, that's kind of like my MS. It's like I have to sit and look at my day and see what I've got on, and then I've got to just provide what I can, and then having naps is a new thing for me. I like having a nap, and a good sleep is perfect for me. I can't survive without a decent sleep. I'm not very useful, but it's it's realising everything and being realistic and not just try to fob it off as a wee bit of tiredness or something. That is something I've got to live with and manage as best I can.
Yeah, I think it's like what Kate and Tessa were saying about the importance of planning and trying to pace yourself throughout the day. I understand that you used to be a keen rugby player. It must have been really difficult when you had to stop playing. So how did you end up going from rugby to curling?
I gave up rugby back in just not long before my diagnosis, and I ended up playing dominoes in the pub. That was my competitive output, and fortunately it was in the pub that the Stranraer wheelchair curling coach came up and asked me in the pub if I fancied trying wheelchair curling. I was kind of like, I know what curling is, but I've no idea what wheelchair curling is, but yeah, I'll give it a shot. So that was in the summer of 2012, and when the ice rink opened in October, I went along, threw a couple of stones, and I was absolutely hooked. And I finally had a bit getting back towards rugby. I've got some sadistic reason. I like to be in the cold. I like to throw things as hard as I can and stuff like that. So there is a link between it, but yeah, it's good fun and it's really filled my life.
It sounds like you've always been quite competitive. So can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up as part of the Paralympic team?
When I started in 2012, I was only 30 at the time, and that was quite young for the wheelchair curling scope. But I worked hard and made quick progress and managed to get into the national squad, the development squad in the 2013-14 season. And then I got into the actual national squad in 14-15 season and get into the Scotland team in 15, and then I've stayed there ever since. And obviously in 2018 it's Paralympic year, and I got selected for Paralympics GB to go and represent Great Britain, and obviously I stayed in the team and managed to get to 2022 as well. So I've got 2 Paralympics under my belt and something I'm incredibly proud of.
That's an amazing achievement. Can you talk about sort of training for the Paralympics? Because it must have been really quite intense. And how did you manage all the training alongside your fatigue?
Yeah, that's when I find it the sort of easiest way to manage, because my days are all set out, and I live in Stranraer, but we're training in Stirling 3 days a week, so it's like 112, 115 miles from home to Stirling. So I was having to go up and stay in a hotel a couple of nights a week for 3 days training. They were full-on days, but there was always gaps during the day where I could just sit back and relax and just conserve some energy and things. Our coach always had a plan for what we were doing each day, so it was easy to manage. And then I'd get home on the Thursday night, and then I had the weekend. I obviously had ice sessions in Stranraer I would do, and I'd go along in the gym and things. But come Saturday, Sunday, I did my 5k park run the Saturday morning, and that just set me up to just sit back, relax, enjoy some football and some rugby on TV. And yeah, my family and stuff know that I just need that time to get away and just be myself and be in my own little space, and sort of refresh me and got me ready for the following week to go again.
And I understand that your fatigue hit you quite hard during the curling finals. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it's because the days you don't get much. Well, you've got no choice. The games plans are set out, and they can't be adapted. So we always go through a run where you play 2 games. Well, 2 games a day, but at one point during the week you play one in the afternoon, one at night, then one first thing the next morning, and one in the afternoon again. So you get 4 games in the space of, well, about 26 hours to get through. And then that game at night finishes quite late, and the game in the morning's quite early. So it's something that I had to get used to. at some point, and I know how important it is to, as soon as the game finishes at night time, to get back and get to bed and get to sleep. And whilst we're there, our coach always calls it a Larry lieback. Well, the players are told that we've got to go and get out of our chairs and get our feet up and relax for a bit, which at first I thought was just a nonsense. I just wanted to go and speak to people or go and investigate things, but now I understand it and take it full on and look forward to my Larry lieback and getting out of my chair and getting my feet up, getting relaxed, have a wee nap if I can, and getting ready to go again.
And my final question is, do you have any advice for the people listening, sort of on your tips and things that you found to help manage your fatigue?
Exercise is a big thing for me. The fitter I've become, the less fatigue's affecting me. Getting to the gym, going out for pushes, eating slightly healthier. I won't claim to be the healthiest eater in the world. Drinking plenty of water. It's been good for me. Obviously getting to the gym and working out and things. Sleep is a massive thing for me, so I've probably said about 3 or 4 times, and that took between my physios up in Orphan at the Douglas Grant, they were brilliant, and the MS specialist at the time, Dr. Martin, and my own GP, getting the right medication and things around it, so I can pretty much go to my bed and drop off, and I managed to sleep quite well thanks to that. So I definitely advise getting some good sleep, and warm weather. That's been said, I'm not great in the warm, which is probably another reason why curling's been good for me. Manages to cool me down a wee bit. So I'd definitely say there's all the information that was provided, I'd definitely listen to it all, and I would always turn to the professionals, your MS nurse and things like that, and get their advice, because it is just key. It's one of the things that we can manage a bit better. Like, obviously I can't walk now, but I can't do anything about that, but my fatigue levels is something that I can do about. And I mean, it's, don't be afraid. I've been called lazy because I go and have a sleep, but that's just, it's just a term, and I just laugh it off and things like that. But it's not something you should be afraid of, and something you should speak to friends and family about, that you just need this time, you just need your space to relax, recharge your batteries, and yeah, don't set goals that are too high. Just take it a bit of time and do as much as you can, and rest when you need to.
Yeah, I think it's really important that your family and friends do understand what you're going through, so they can try and support you the best they can. Thank you so much for sort of sharing your personal experience, and it's so nice to hear about your amazing achievements in your sporting career. Now we're going to try and move on to some questions that have come in from the audience. So Hugh, if you leave your camera on, and Tessa and Kate, if you could pop your cameras and your mics back on while we go through a few questions. We've got 15 minutes left. Right. Just having a look through them. So one question we have is, how do you get others to understand that you're fatigued and you're not just being lazy, even when they know that you have MS? Do you have any tips? Anyone can sort of pitch in with answers.
I'll start if that's okay. So I think it is, like you say, trying to get them to understand that fatigue relating to MS is different to normal tiredness. Trying to get them to perhaps understand that, you know, normally when you're tired, you can kind of carry on and still do the things that you want to do. You can push through, have a, you know, one night's sleep, catch up. Yeah, maybe you were a bit grumpy and tired, but you could still do the things. But that it's very different with MS, that you can get to that point where it stops you doing things. And that's because of the things that we've talked about, that kind of primary fatigue, that actually my body is using more energy at a kind of base level, in terms of kind of what might be happening in terms of the MS kind of process. And so trying to get them to understand that difference, I think, is important. So taking that time out to have a chat with them and say, I know it's hard to understand because it's an invisible symptom, but this is what I'm experiencing. This is what it feels like for me. And this is why I have to manage things differently.
Really useful tips there. Did anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say that your close, your family and friends should understand and things, and if they don't, then I would point them in the direction of these webinars and things like that, and the information to help them get through it and things like that. I'm lucky my family and friends have been brilliant with me ever since my diagnosis, and yeah, they'll still joke that I'm lazy, but they do know that it is one of my symptoms and something that they understand. So I would definitely speak to them, and if they're not understanding, then point them in direction and things like this.
Brilliant. The next question is specifically for Hugh. So someone has said that they would really like to get involved in the Paralympics. How do I go about this?
I guess it's finding a sport first, a sport that you love, sport that you want to enjoy. There's, like I say, I was fortunate that somebody came up and asked me in the pub if I wanted to try it. But I know since being in the sport that I know with curling, there's trycurling.com where you can go along and you can try curling. I know Dumfries and Galloway Disability Sport do a lot of stuff in my regions. I'm sure regions all over the country are the same. So I'd get in with a sport, and then once you find that sport you enjoy, it's then working hard to get to national level and international level. But just in general, even if it's not to reach a Paralympics, getting involved in sport or any activity, it's just great for your mental health. It's so important. It's been so inspirational for me to have that, and have made new groups of friends and met people in wheelchairs and things like that, and learned a whole lot of advice. So I would definitely, whether it be in Facebook or local newspapers and things like that, there should be advertisements for disability sport in your area and in your region, and it's getting into a sport that you really love and enjoy, because it is going to take up a big part of your life if you want to get to the Paralympics.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. So we have had a couple of questions actually about medication for fatigue. I don't know if Kate or Tessa, you could maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the medication that is recommended at the moment in the NICE guidelines is amantadine. And like I said, some people have found it beneficial, but it's only a small percentage of people, I think, with MS that have found it useful. But it would be something that you can kind of discuss with your GP, or probably with your MS consultant, if that's something to trial. I think that's the one specific for MS at the moment in terms of fatigue. There are some other ones, I think, that are not kind of licensed, but I think that's the one that's recommended in the NICE guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Right, Tessa, I think so, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Great. I'll move on to another question. So this is from someone that says they know all the tips about pacing, which you mentioned in your presentation, but I can never seem to put them into practice. I always just want to get everything finished so that I can rest, by which time I'm in a heap. Do you have any ideas?
So my advice would be, if you are forgetting to rest, maybe setting a timer on your phone. So setting, like Kate said earlier, time not task. So maybe you do 10 minutes of the cooking or cleaning, and then setting a 20 or 30-minute timer for rest, to try and break up that time in your day, but also to give you a reminder, so you're not overgoing on the task either way, whether it's rest or activity, and trying to hold yourself accountable. And maybe as well, just doing a reflective diary at the end of the day. Maybe you say you try out doing certain rest periods throughout the day and seeing if that makes a difference, seeing how you feel maybe at the end of the day or the next day. Maybe you need to rest more, maybe you need to do more activity, and just kind of doing some self-reflection to see if these small changes in your routine are actually making a difference in a better or a worse direction.
And it might be that, if that's still, that you've done those practical things, you've set your alarms, but you're still kind of thinking, oh no, I really need to still push on and get this all done, that perhaps thinking about that CBT kind of input might be helpful, because it might be more kind of challenging your thoughts about allowing yourself to change that behavior. could be the key.
Thank you. They're really useful tips. I think there's certainly a big sort of psychological aspect to sort of managing your activity levels sometimes. We've also had a question come in about work. So do you have any tips for managing fatigue whilst you're sort of working full time and you're working quite long hours from home? Do you have any tips on managing fatigue in that situation?
So I think obviously it depends what people's jobs are, but one of the key things with work is around disclosure. I think the evidence kind of shows that if you disclose your condition early, perhaps to your employer, perhaps to your direct colleagues, if you can have a kind of conversation with them. I don't know in this situation whether they know if you've got MS, whether they know that you're experiencing fatigue, because often that can be one of the barriers to you kind of implementing strategies to kind of help manage it. So it might be thinking about, again, your kind of rest breaks in terms of work, but whether you feel able to take those depending on what your kind of colleagues or people are aware of, perhaps only sharing with them what's appropriate, what you feel comfortable with. Perhaps the environment. I mean, I know I'm in this office and I'm sat right by a really hot radiator that I can't turn off. Now that wouldn't be kind of helpful kind of if you're experiencing kind of heat sensitivity, fatigue. So thinking about those sides of things. And again, looking at your work schedule, you know, if you are working from home, often then you're not perhaps, you know, the day can kind of bleed, can't it, into your kind of home life as well. So perhaps trying to be a bit stricter with that, thinking about the planning, the organization, making sure you are taking a break kind of away from your screen, perhaps setting up your diary so that you're planning in some rest times where people can't book other things in for you, depending on what your work situation is. But there are, again, some really good resources. There's like a kind of MS and work kind of for employees and for employers guide, which is, they're on the MS Society website, aren't they? But they're kind of really useful resources that might be things to link with. But I think, yeah, thinking about disclosure is important. I think if that's something that you've not done to help you then manage your kind of symptoms at work.
Yeah, I think it's important for your employer to sort of know sometimes so they can support you as best as they can.
Yeah.
Another question we've had come in is around caffeine. So I think you might have mentioned in your presentation that it can worsen fatigue. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's just being mindful of how much caffeine you're intaking throughout the day. And if you can limit it about 2 hours before you go to sleep at night, so that it's not keeping you up. And just be aware that sometimes if you're combining caffeine with sugar, so biscuits, or if you're adding sugar to your coffee, that sugar intake might give you a high spike of energy, but then it could lead to quite a significant downfall as well. So trying to alternate that with some more sustainable kind of energy, maybe a natural form of sugar like fruit or vegetables.
Brilliant.
I was just going to say, I think if you are struggling to get to sleep, I think they say not to have any caffeine after about 2 o'clock, I think, in the afternoon. I think so, quite a lot earlier than perhaps we might think if you're really struggling with getting to sleep.
So another question we have, so someone has said that they feel fine immediately after they wake up in the morning, but their fatigue increases as the day goes on. Is that quite a normal experience to have with MS fatigue? And they've asked if it could be related to their body temperature increasing during the day.
I think everyone's experience is different kind of when we talk to them. Some people will be experiencing that definitely, but others kind of wake up feeling really, really exhausted. It probably is for that person kind of related to just, you know, that buildup of activity throughout the day and perhaps not taking rest breaks kind of through the day. It could be, like they say, kind of linked to the environment that they're in. If they're doing more, maybe they're getting hotter in their cells. They could be having an element of that, but it perhaps is related to just, you know, keeping going and not sort of taking a break to kind of top energy levels up as the day goes on.
I think we've got about 5 minutes. We might have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So someone has said that they find that their anxiety gets a lot worse when they're fatigued. Is that sort of a normal thing to happen? they say it can feel quite overwhelming when it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, definitely is. I think, like we've talked about, all these sort of symptoms overlap with each other, don't they? Really, kind of fatigue, anxiety, stress, they all exacerbate each other. So I think that's something that we see a lot, that when kind of mood is low or when anxiety is higher, then fatigue is higher, and equally the other way around as well. So I think that is really common. So it's identifying if that's the thing that's having an impact for you, and then looking at how you might manage it. So perhaps speaking, if that's an area that you think you need some support, kind of speaking to your GP or trying to link in with your kind of local IACT services to get some kind of psychological support, because it will definitely be having an impact on fatigue levels, and equally the other way around. I think we see that quite a lot with people.
Mm-hmm. And just quickly, the final question around exercise. In simple terms, can you explain how exercise actually helps with fatigue and energy? I think some people probably think it's a bit odd that exercise is recommended when you're feeling exhausted. So if you could maybe just explain in simple terms how it actually helps.
Well, for me, I was unfit and exercise got me fitter, so that then the knock-on effect is that I can then deal with fatigue better and I'm not as tired. And there's a lot of things that maybe if I didn't have MS, it's the same thing. The healthier you live in your life, the less fatigue you would have in a general life. So I think it's the same with MS, you're taken away. I don't know, Kate and Tessa might be able to correct me in this, but I just feel that the exercise, just being that, I think it's a mental thing as well, being out and feeling good, it just helps with everything else. It's just that knock-on effect. It won't cure your fatigue, but you might feel tired after you exercise, but in the long term, 1, 2, 3 months down the line, then you'll feel the benefit compared to where you were.
Yes, exactly. I'd agree with you, Hugh. And when you're exercising, if you're doing it correctly, you're releasing endorphins and you're releasing serotonin. And these two chemicals in our brain help to boost our mood, which in turn can boost our energy levels. So making sure that you're getting enough exercise throughout the week is really important to help with that. And also allowing yourself to have the strength in your muscles, so that way when you do go to an activity that you want to do, that you've got the strength there to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. I think we're just coming to the end now. So thank you so much to all of our speakers for taking part. I hope that everyone watching has been able to take something useful from this webinar. There's been so many sort of useful practical tips that hopefully you'll be able to put into practice. So all of the webinars that we're running this week will be available to watch on our YouTube channels, and we will send you the link to the recording once it's available. Here at the MS Trust, we do have a wide range of resources on fatigue management, which you might find useful. They're listed on the slide here. Don't worry if you don't have time to list them all down. We will send you a follow-up email, which includes all the links on the slide here. And we will also send you the link to the webinar recording as well. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. And thank you so much to all our speakers for sharing such useful tips and experiences. And we hope you found the session useful. Thanks for joining us.